Wednesday, May 22nd, 2019, meeting of the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners. If you would, join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our first item of business this morning is citizen input for anything that is not on the agenda as a item. Looks like we've got two people wanting to speak on the PERS proposed resolution. So, and if anybody else wants to speak, there's blue forms up here that we would give to Laura, and then they get passed to us. But the first will be Janelle Rebick.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Janelle Rebick, and I'm actually a third grade teacher here in Bend Lapine, and I currently serve as the president of the Bend Lapine Education Association, representing over 1,000 certified employees. And I understand yesterday from the agenda that you were proposed with passing a resolution around PERS reform. And so I'm here as a public employee asking you to vote no or just ignore that resolution. As a Tier 2 member with over 10 years left in my career, the proposed changes to PERS would actually result in a 12.5% reduction to my IAP. As a teacher, I already make 22% less than my peers in the private sector who have similar education and experience as myself. Myself, as well as probably about half of my fellow colleagues, work second jobs just in order to make jobs meet. So we're bartenders, concierges, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, etc., just to supplement our teacher income. We are not living large. We do this work because we believe in our students and want to be there for them. We've accepted lower salaries and difficult working conditions. On May 8th, hopefully you saw as we turned out in force, not for just ourselves, but for our students to advocate for the passage of the Student Success Act. But in exchange for those lower salaries, we were promised a secure retirement. And over the past 20 years, that has been chipped away at. And now they are asking to take further reductions. There have already been a number of changes to correct PERS, and yet public employees still continue to bear the brunt of the blame for insufficient funding for our public employees. Currently, 30% of our public employees are eligible to retire, and last time cuts were made, we saw a huge mass retirement that meant that school districts, local governments, and state workers faced a workforce shortage. Currently, teacher prep programs over the last 10 years have seen a 50% reduction in candidates, which means we are facing a huge shortage coming up. Reductions to our benefits is going to mean an even further decrease in people wanting to do this job as well as other public service jobs. Recruitment and retention is going to be a challenge. Because of those reasons, I urge you to vote no, and please do not sign on around this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle.
Thanks for coming today.
Yeah.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Absolutely.
So if you followed our discussion yesterday, an organization came to us to have us sign a particular resolution, and then yesterday passed out of a committee in Salem was a set of measures, and then there's just general policy. What's that?
I was there.
Oh yeah, okay, yesterday. So when you say something you made the comment that it would be a 12.5% reduction in your IEP, are you talking about what PERS Solutions is proposing, or what came out of committee?
So what came out of committee? So what came out of currently out of committee would be a 12.5%. I believe PERS Solutions that would actually be larger because I think one of their proposals is instead of right now it would be 2.5% that would be going towards funding the unfunded liability. The PERS Solution would be that full 6% would go into the unfunded liability. So it would actually be larger if the PERS Solution resolution passed.
So just and for clarity, so you're talking about the IEP, which is the
Individual.
It's called the employee contribution. In most entities, the employer actually pays it the way it's set up now.
So for Bend Lapine, that's a negotiated piece. So each district has to negotiate it. For Redmond example, that 6% comes out of their salary directly, and Bend Lapine, our employer, pays that 6%.
Oh, really? So just
so
within the two districts, it's completely
yes.
different. In the county, it's mostly comes out of the employer. I think it all comes out of the employers also. So it's like, and it is negotiated, but interesting. So you're actually saying oppose the bill if we do a resolution. And I was just looking at the vote. It came out of committee, but I don't know where it goes out. We don't know where. We're going to try to get a briefing on that today.
It's going to hit the floor. So it's actually come out of the Full Ways and Means Committee yesterday. It was in the partial committee in the morning, and then it went to the Full Ways and Means yesterday, and it passed and came out of committee, so it'll be going to both chambers.
Oh, it came out of Ways and Means. The full committee yesterday also?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I didn't say, we
Moving
just.
right along, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah. When you say lower salary, because we don't deal with education here, we just know comparisons of our own employees, what is the range of salary when you're talking about it for teachers? And because we're aware of what we pay our employees, but I have no knowledge of that. But
The beginning for Ben Lapine, the beginning salary for a teacher is about $37,000. The maximum, I think we're right now at about $68,000, I want to say, for topping out. And then, of course, obviously, we're negotiating every year around cost of living increases and things which have been very minimal, especially living in Ben Lapine. We have a lot of our teachers who we may, hire teachers pretty readily in Ben Lapine, but once they're here, they find that they can't afford to live here. So, I mean, you've heard the term poverty with a view. We have a lot of our staff that is living either in South County or Redmond or even Prineville because they can't afford housing in Bend.
Okay, and, okay, do you have any questions?
So thank you very much for joining us. This is the conversation that I yearn to have, because it looks like we can drop bombs on each other about how we should be making decisions and why the other side is wrong or whatever, but we're talking about a true cost of payroll, 30% for the Tier 1 employees, and there was no intention on setting this up probably back in the 80s when this was, we're paying for it now and then in the next few biennium. So somehow, either we're going to be reducing services, laying people off if we want to hold on to those things. So it's not an easy system or answer that we're all going to have to come up with. I'll acknowledge that, that what's going on in the state legislature is, we're trying to take a position maybe, but that bill is moving so fast, we wouldn't even know exactly what we're taking a position on. But thank you very much for the conversation and the advocacy. This is wonderful. Yeah.
Any comments or questions?
I appreciate you coming this morning.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yep. And then Christine, is it Morgan? Yeah, Christine.
Thank you. And I'm going to speak on some of the same things. So I know you all had a lot of questions about the specifics, so I just kind of want to back up just a little bit over the idea of this. Just some things that are really important to keep in mind.
What are you referring to when you say the idea of
The PERS reforms and what's happening with PERS right now.
in Salem or the PERS solution?
Happening in Salem and happening with different solutions being offered back and forth. So just some perspective on this. 2003 led
Who do
to
you
a lot.
represent? Sorry, you're just.
Sorry, I should probably back up a little bit. My name is Christine Morgan. I work for SEIU, and I represent DHS workers. Thank you. And I'm also a former DHS worker myself. So,
In this building?
yes, represent DHS workers there. Yes, and across the state. So my perspective comes at this from knowing workers and knowing workers that receive PERS across vast different salaries and what it's like living with that and going through several different contract reforms. And so when we're talking about endorsing or supporting different PERS solutions in different issues, I just want to remind you that these are workers who are an essential part of our programs. What PERS solutions and some of these other reforms are proposing is separating that. They're saying we need to fund programs, but not fund PERS. And PERS is an essential part of the programs that are served in this county. Teachers are not just, they don't just receive money for their salary and teach. They need to have that retirement. That's an essential part of their package. The workers that provide food benefits and work at the library, retirement is part of those programs. So to please keep that in mind if you decide to support this or not, that workers are an essential part of this program and PERS is part of their compensation packet. These reforms across the board are being proposed are taking away from that compensation. And they're happening when we are finally starting to fund schools for the first time in 2 decades. So to just please question that and look at that and remember the workers in this county. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I guess I would just acknowledge once again that we're talking about the overhead going from 20 to 30% of the cost of payroll for the commitments made 20 and 30 years ago. So
Yes.
it's not the current workers, it's not the current Tier 2 and OPSERP, and it's not even the fault of a Tier 1 system. It's the evolution over time that it's getting very expensive right now. So once again, I mean, we're here just to provide those services, employ people to do great work for the citizens around us, and this is a tight spot we're going to be in because it's going to get very expensive.
Absolutely, and employer costs are a significant thing to be considered. And as you said, it's not caused by Tier 3 workers or OSERP, and as the courts have ruled, this is something that we can't go backwards on for Tier 1 and Tier 2. So just asking that we maybe find solutions that are, or endorse solutions that aren't just on the backs of workers.
Well, and just to clarify, because saying words in a public meeting can get interesting, but the commitment of the escalating value of that Tier 1 system and 10 years of zero interest rates, basically, in the Great Recession, provide this big divergence, and I think that's what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
The fact that there was no way we were designing a system that was going to be in a 0% interest rate environment for 10 years. So calibrating that system probably could or should have been done or needed to happen, and now that's the discussion. So
Yeah, and I
just
think a
sharing.
lot of that, what you're talking about, was addressed in 2003 to kind of change that system. So again, what we are talking, which I think you're saying, is we're talking about legacy costs and how to address them. So
Well, yeah, and I'll just kind of add to what Commissioner DeBonne, so we have a different perspective. It's good to hear what, as representative of the state employees and education, because we have county employees that are all part of the PERS system too. I think what is alarming to us is just decision makers is one, that the unfunded liability keeps increasing. So it went up $4 billion or $5 billion last year more. So as from a just prudent business standpoint, how much debt do you want to keep incurring on future generations as well as on us? And then the second part being that although it's part of we can't undo the benefits that are already in place, can we continue to have all of the promises is 2003 promises, can we even afford that forever? Or do we have to do something where people, maybe compensation changes and PERS benefits are reduced or whatever? But the other part, it's not just the impact on employers, which it is, we look at it and it's, so we're going from $7 million a year in PERS cost to $15 million this year. So it's doubled in a few years. So that takes away from other things we could spend money. But it also takes more out of all the taxpayers that, I know all the public union employees are also taxpayers, which is often forgotten. They pay the same taxes, but a lot of the taxpayers don't have this kind of robust PERS, so that's this combination, comparison with private and public. But
I think
it's good to get more information from both your groups. And
yeah, and I think that's some really good information. I'll point out that the unfunded liability hurts workers too.
Yeah.
As that's going up, that is not, coming into their paycheck, and that's a cost that's also coming out of their taxes. So definitely solutions to solve the unfunded liability are not antithetical to what workers want. And I do really think the 2003, separating kind of the concept of the unfunded liability to the 2003 reforms, the 2000 reforms are very strong and very sustainable. It really is just about addressing this unfunded liability. So I hear you on a lot of that. Thank you.
thanks for
Thank you
joining
very
us.
much for joining us.
Any other public comments before we get into the consent agenda? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And any exceptions or changes, or so I entertain a motion in support of the consent agenda. From either of you.
I move we accept the consent agenda listed today.
And I'll second it.
Any further discussion? I was going to say something about, three of these were the legislative conference call minutes, which are very thorough. That was good. Also, the appointment of our two new members of the audit committee, which been working on for a while, and I guess we're just sending the letters out now, so that's good. And then we've got, is that the final one on the road, on the six corners?
Yes.
Okay, so we completed the agreements to acquire the needed lands for the reconfiguring of the Six Corners intersection at Quarry and Bend-Redmond Highway, Deschutes, or Bend-Redmond Highway, yeah, the old Bend. Okay.
It was
Commissioner?
actually from 1916, what they're fixing. So was a very confusing
Yeah.
intersection, a six-way.
Okay. So, Commissioner Dare? You vote.
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Okay, we'll move on to the action item, and we have a presentation from the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. I'm not sure who all is going to present that, but if you'll come up and give your name for the record, and we're anxious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, well, good morning. My name is Chris Knight. I'm the brand-new director of the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, just in my second week, so I appreciate the time this morning with the commissioners. Thanks for the time on the agenda to give you a kind of an annual update. Deschutes County gives us some funding each year, and so we have an opportunity each year to come and provide an update on our work and how we're using that funding. In previous years, you would have heard from Ryan Houston. You might remember he had been the director for 17 years. So I'm excited to be here. I lived in Bend 20 years ago, but have been out of the county for 18 years now, and my family's from Deschutes County, or my wife's family's from Deschutes County, so it's nice to be back and bring the family back. So I've got a few folks with me that are going to help give this presentation. Colleen Miller, who is our education director, and she has been serving the last 6 or 7 months as our interim director for the Watershed Council. So appreciate the service from Colleen. And then two of our board members, Bill Anthony and Rick Wright. Colleen and I are going to give a short presentation, and then Bill and Rick are going to say a few words about the Watershed Council and their experience. So, yeah, again, appreciate the time to be here. And I'll talk a little bit about the funding we've received towards the end of the
presentation. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
There it is.
There we are.
Yeah, if there's pictures.
Yeah, so a 2019 update for the commissioners today. And so this slide is just kind of a reminder that, we're not alone as a watershed council. There are 59 other watershed councils around the state. And, some key words there that I think of, we're a watershed council is community-based, voluntary, and non-regulatory, and working in local communities. And so as you'll hear from Colleen, some of our education work, is all around the county in different communities, in Lapine and Sisters and Bend. Colleen is working with local students and teachers, doing great things. So again, we're right there in the middle of the state. This next slide kind of shows our mission and our vision, and as well as kind of our project area. And so our mission is pretty simple, seeking to protect and restore this 2 million acre Upper Deschutes watershed. And I think of it as really through 3 pillars of our work: restoration, education, and long-term monitoring and research. And so just as a basis for where we're working working all the way from the upper end of the watershed. And when I say watershed, I just mean those lands, all those lands that drain water to the Deschutes River. And so that's all the way from the top of the system, at the top of the Little Deschutes River and Little Lava Lake, down through Bend, and all the tributary rivers that come into the Deschutes, Tumalo Creek, Metolius River, White Shoes Creek, and many others. But our focus area ends kind of at Lake Billy Chinook. So top of the watershed down to Lake Billy Chinook. In terms of the Watershed Council's work with the county, just a reminder that we've been partners in watershed management since 1997, so over 20 years now. And at that time, the county and the county commissioners back in '97 recognized our Watershed Council as the Watershed Council for Deschutes County. And so over the years, we've had representation from a couple different county commissioners on our board. Most recently, Alan Unger. Before that, Dennis Luke. And more recently now, at our next board meeting coming up here in June, one of the county staff, Will Groves from your planning department, has expressed interest in joining our board, and so our board will be considering him for a board position. So not finalized, but there's a connection with county staff on our board, it looks like. Again, we're excited about that. I just provided a list of our current board members. We have up to 18 board members. I think we're at 14 or 15 now, but I just share this. We've got a diverse group of people from different backgrounds and different types of expertise. I think the common thread, though, is a passion, and they care about the river and the health of the watershed. Happy to provide this later if we can. And again, Rick and Bill are here today. So I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about those three pillars of our work: the restoration, the education, and the monitoring. So since we formed in 1996, and since we've been working with the county since 1997, over 50 watershed enhancement projects have been completed. I'll just share one example. This photo is of Deschutes Creek, which flows through the community of Sisters. This has been a long-term restoration effort over the last, multiple years, up to 10 years. But it meant a lot to me to hear from Bill, who lives in Sisters, just these last couple of weeks, how 20 plus years ago, Deschutes Creek was, some years wasn't flowing at all. Some years was just puddles in the stream at times of the year. And so through working with partners like Deschutes River Conservancy, Deschutes Land Trust, over the last 10 years, that river is now flowing again. It's got new life, and through the restoration, there's habitat for fish and wildlife and that sort of thing. So it's a success story, and hopefully a story we continue to tell as that work wraps up.
I was at the stamp ceremony yesterday, and your group was there, and so I picked up all these current brochures.
Oh, great.
So it's perfect what you're, yes.
We've also, we've got a kind of a one-page fact sheet about our work and a couple brochures over here. But at this time, I'm going to invite Colleen to come up and just talk a little bit about the work she does with the kids throughout the county through our education program.
Thank you so much for having us. Excuse me. I am Colleen Miller, and I've been with the Watershed Council since 2002, which is quite a long time, but it's been a wonderful organization to work for. We have an amazing board, and developing the youth education program has been so inspiring and so rewarding. When I first started with the Watershed Council, we didn't have an education program, and now we have the opportunity to work with about 3,000 students every year. So those are students of all ages from kindergarten to college. We coordinate art projects, music, writing, science, all of it as much as we can out on our rivers and streams. The goal to really connect students to our natural world, which is lovely, and we're very lucky to have it, and hopefully help them develop a sense of stewardship for it so that they protect it for generations to come. We also provide teacher training workshops for many of the teachers that we work with. That basically means a day or two out on our rivers and streams, just really helping them sort of develop a sense of empowerment so that they can continue to lead these outside learning activities for their students for years to come. We also have a community outreach program where we work with community members, adults throughout the year, also to help engage and educate them about the health of our rivers and streams, and unfortunately sometimes what's not so healthy. So as a part of that, we have our annual river cleanup, which happens at the end of every July. This is a poster from last year's event where we work with about 25 scuba divers who actually go in the river We have about 50 community members who come out on paddle boards, kayaks, canoes, and they work with the divers to actually pull garbage out of the river. So last year's event, we had about total 200 volunteers, and we pulled about 2,000 pounds of garbage out of the river just from the Bill Healy Road Bridge down to Drake Park. So unfortunately, the debris in the river has been increasing over the past 5 or so years, with obviously the use of the river just increasing every single year. So we really depend on community support from the county, but also support from community members to help us make that event happen so that we can continue to protect and clean up our river.
So is it the last Saturday then of July?
It's July, this year it'll be July 27th. Yep. You guys are all invited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you have 3,000 students that go through your programs. I don't know how many students there are in, say, Deschutes County, but there's quite a bit more than that. How do you pick, or who's picked to go in through your programs, or what causes them to go through your programs?
So there are about 30,000 students in Deschutes County, and when we originally developed the education program, we asked that question, like how to reach out to teachers and how to decide who to work with. At this point, we're pretty much booked, so we only have an education staff of 2. So out of that, then, we work with some of our grants, really want to focus on serving underserved schools, so title schools, schools that have really high percentages of free and reduced lunches for the students. So we work with La Pine quite a bit. We work with many South County schools and schools that basically their students don't have these opportunities, or their parents don't have the time or the resources to get their kids out on their own. So whenever possible, we'll focus on those schools. But we also try to work with a wide range as far as the age of students. So our programs really focus on a lot of elementary schools we work with in South County and Redmond. So as far as how we choose, again, it sort of depends year after year.
So you kind of come up with a program where we think we can do this many kids, so we're going to try to get this many from this area and another, and so it's kind of all strategically done from planning, basically.
Yeah, we try to sort of just spread out, basically, so that we're reaching schools and students from a variety of areas throughout the county, so La Pine, Bend, and Redmond, and Sisters as well.
Is it all river related? I mean, is it in terms of education?
Yeah. Yeah, just based on our mission, our mission is to protect and restore the Upper Deschutes watershed, and so this is one way, our community outreach with adults, but through our youth education program, it's really focused on getting kids out to our rivers and streams so that they, fall in love with them and learn to care about them. Yep. Thank you.
It seems like just a comment, the more you can get out there, probably the better.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm on the board of the Children's Forest of Central Oregon. The Children's Forest of Central Oregon, which is another local nonprofit, and we work really closely with our partners to try to kind of divide and conquer, essentially, so that we are able to work with more students. So we collaborate throughout the year to make sure that we're trying to reach as many schools as possible.
I think even the city of Bend, there's lots of kids that aren't getting exposure now because it's become more of a city.
Yeah.
So it's a different dynamic causing it. But
yeah, it's surprising. I mean, every time I'm out with a class, I will have multiple kids tell me that they've never been to the Deschutes River or the Metolius, and it's right there in our backyard. So we try to do as much as we can.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is just kind of that the differentiator of our organization is Colleen getting these students out on the river. It's not coming into the classroom and talking to them about the rivers they get out, and that's great. And one thing I like too is I was talking about White Shoes Creek and our restoration work. Sometimes that goes hand in hand with the education. You can get the kids out to those projects and they plant some trees or willows along the stream, and that's they get to understand what what the restoration is about and be part of it. And I've got a niece and nephew here in town, and when I was considering this position, they told me about their experience getting out on Deschutes Creek as kids in elementary school and how that kind of stuck with them, and that meant something to me. So the two pillars, we covered restoration and education. The last one is really what we call monitoring and research. And we do that for a few reasons, to kind of have that long-term data set, to understand water quality in the Deschutes River. What are temperatures doing over time? What are other parameters of water quality? What's happening? And so I just pulled one slide because I'm still getting familiar with our monitoring work, but again, it ties back, it connects to our restoration and education work. This map just happens to show Deschutes Creek, and those red dots are places where we're monitoring stream temperatures. And so the connection there is we want to not only understand what's happening over time, but also make sure we're understanding what changes are happening as a result of our restoration work. If we've done all this work over a decade in Deschutes Creek, we want to understand the benefits and how we can continue to do things better over time. Jumping into the funding a little bit, I'll just share this pie chart that shows our funding this current fiscal year that we're about to wrap up here at the end of June. But a few main points, just that we're largely grant funded, 90% grant funded. So that blue part of the pie chart and the red part of the pie chart, those are public and private grants. We receive both public and private grants. The piece from Deschutes County there is shown, $20,000, which represents about 2% of our budget. I'll explain in the next slide, though, why that's so important to us. The other thing I'd say is, with this public and private grant funding, much of that is coming from outside Central Oregon. It's private dollars from Seattle or Portland, or it's dollars from Salem or federal dollars, but we are then turning those dollars and putting them back here in Central Oregon, whether it be employing contractors to do a restoration project or putting them towards education programs, that sort of thing. So, money from outside Central Oregon being put on the ground here in Central Oregon. I just also mentioned, we have a lean operation with 9% overhead, which is low for a nonprofit. We share facilities and staff with the Deschutes River Conservancy to be efficient and save costs as much as we can. Just wanted to say a little bit about that importance of the funding from the county. The reason it's so important is we are able to take those dollars and use them as match for funding that comes from the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, OWEB, and they have something called a capacity grant for watershed councils. And so those county dollars plus those OWEB capacity dollars, that's what allows us to get out and meet with landowners and talk about new future projects. It's how Colleen gets to go talk with new teachers and new school districts. It's that project development money that grants typically won't fund. It's like, how do you queue up these new projects? We use those dollars to then go get more grant dollars to actually do projects on the ground. And so we're leveraging those dollars from the county to bring more of these grant dollars back to Deschutes County and really put on all our programs. So part of our update here today is just hoping we can continue to receive that support from the county for our programs.
Is the Watershed Council, is that state funded? I mean, or is that a privately funded also?
It's both, and so part of that funding comes from the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board.
Or that's what I mean. Is the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board a state agency?
That's my understanding. It is a state agency, in part funded by lottery dollars.
Yeah, it is a state agency. It was developed by Keith Sauber in his first term many years ago, and it receives 7.5% of lottery funds that go toward watershed councils out of state.
And that's the formula. It's just that simple, kind of. It's not. I was curious because we hear about other parts of state government that haven't grown, and one specific is with the justice system. The court system hasn't gotten the same funding over the last 10 years as other things have. So I was wondering, does the funding from the Watershed Enhancement Board change, or is it always based on that formula?
So the formula for OWEB, which is the acronym for Watershed Enhancement Board,
You can join us on the microphone, Kevin.
Yeah.
Great information.
Yeah.
Yep.
Come on up here.
Okay. So yeah, OWEB's funding is all from lottery dollars. 7.5% of lottery dollars go to the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. Then on our end, we apply for grants. So it's always a competitive basis, applying for either restoration, monitoring, or education grants from OWEB. And they fund those 59 watershed councils around the state every year based on that competitive grant cycle.
Great, thanks, that's what I
Sure.
So if we still have a couple minutes, I'd just invite Bill and or Rick to just come up as board members and local community citizens to talk about our work.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
So my name's Bill Anthony. I am live in Sisters. I'm retired U.S. Forest Service District Ranger in Sisters. The last 14 years of my career with the Sisters Ranger District. And since then, since in my post-work for money career, I volunteer for a couple conservation organizations. One is the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. The other is the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project, of which I sit on one of two watershed chairs on the steering committee with that collaborative. And the way I look at it is healthy, resilient forests help healthy, resilient watersheds. So that's my passion these days, and I love it and live and breathe it. I want to share just a short abstract of a very long, remarkable story about Deschutes Creek from my perspective and the role of the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council in that, as well as hundreds of other people and organizations. In 1997, my wife and I returned from about 10-year absence in Deschutes County. We had lived in Bend in the 80s where we met and got married. We left for 10 years, came back in October, I think it was Halloween Day, and as we drove from Colorado and crossed the bridge crossing what was then called Squaw Creek, going into town, I looked over out the window and looked down at the stream because I'm a fisherman, and I saw that the stream was mostly dry. It was kind of puddles of slow-moving water amongst the rocks, and I thought to myself, probably not going to spend a lot of time on that particular creek. As the winter rolled on and I got my feet wet with things going on in the district, it was dark. It was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. I was leaving the office, walking down the hallway, went past our conference room. There's a group of people huddled over maps, talking. And so I walked in and introduced myself because I was still meeting people. And it was the first year of the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. The then executive director, Barbara Lee, huddled over maps and other documents with some of my staff as well as other interested citizens, and they were working on a long-term strategic restoration plan for Squaw Creek. And as I looked it over, they gave me a copy of what they were doing, looked it over, it seemed fairly monumental. And fast forward 22 years now, skipping a lot of the chapters of the story that are really remarkable, and hope someday to get you out there and show you some of that. But as we look back on it now the stream has stable minimum flows of cold, clean water. There has been miles of ditches that deliver water to downstream or down system agricultural folks that have been piped. Some more are going to be piped. And so the end result of that is not necessarily we're getting more water in the watershed, but we're making more effective use of it to meet multiple users' needs as well as municipalities. So there's been a more efficient delivery. Farmers downstream or other water right holders are getting more water, pressurized. There's more water left in the stream for all kinds of uses. There's been miles of stream that have been restored to their natural functioning of meandering and meadows and floodplain streams that were bulldozed, decades ago for, at that time, seemed like good reasons for flood management as well as creating more grazing land. There's now a wild and scenic river plan for the Deschutes above the town of Sisters that is mostly implemented, and there are now trails and overlooks and educational plaques around there, and there's a constituency of users that didn't exist when I came there 20-some years ago. When I arrived in Sisters, interesting enough looking back on it, there was not a lot of interest in Deschutes Creek, then Squaw Creek, because the creek was dry a lot of the year. water never really made it to town except for in the little ditches that ran past the restaurants, and people loved that. But now there is a large constituency of users, a lot of tourists, a lot of hikers, thousands of hours of volunteerism as stewards on the creek, thousands of hours of youth getting out there learning about watershed science, sense of place where they live, and being creative with their arts and the things that go through young people's minds as they kind of express themselves. So anyway, this is just an incredible, remarkable story. The Upper Deschutes Watershed Council played a very significant role in that, but it would be unfair and inaccurate to say that any one organization or person was totally responsible for this remarkable story, because the remarkable part of the story was really the dozens of organizations and the hundreds, at least hundreds, maybe more people that are involved that figured out ways to change the way we use water so that water reached more of the needed uses, restoring things, celebrating things, enjoying things. And so there were many conservation organizations for land, water, and wildlife. There were local, state, and federal agencies. There were, again, lots of people, lots of users, municipalities, as well as end-use agriculture users, everybody willing to pitch in, try to figure out what we can do to solve this complex problem. And the story in the end was incredible success. So if we can celebrate that and learn from it as we start to look towards the Upper Deschutes, that would be a great thing. And I'd love to get you guys out.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. Thanks for filling us in. I think I bought 2 tickets to for a tour of it in the fall at the Deschutes River Conservancy dinner. So,
There you go.
hi, Rick.
Good morning. I'm Rick Wright. I'm board president. I've been president now for 11 years, which is remarkable. I've been on the board since 2007. I think my background, well, let me start, first of all, kind of going into the makeup of our board, because I find that remarkable. In the collaborative representation that we have on the board, we have people that are knowledgeable on legal aspects of river conservation. We have irrigation, agricultural, educational, recreational, environmental science, and governmental interests all represented on our board. As was mentioned earlier, Dennis Luke and Alan Unger were on our boards. We've had representation from the city government. Jim Clinton was on our board. So we've had great representation from both local governments. My interest is the recreational. In 1982, I got a new passion, which was whitewater kayaking. And so it was in 2007 that I actually was asked to be on the board representing the recreational interests. And then as I got on the board, I guess what I really learned was our first retreat we had out at Lake Creek Lodge. And I saw this beautiful natural creek coming through Lake Creek Lodge. It was just gorgeous. And then I saw pictures on the wall of what it used to look like, and it was concrete swimming pools and just totally messed up. And so I said, well, gosh, how'd this happen? It was the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council restored the whole thing. So from there, just looking at some of the different projects that we've worked on, Three Sisters Irrigation District outflow was all done by, through the Watershed Council. Lake Creek Lodge, as I mentioned. Old Mill, as the Old Mill became a viable shopping area, that whole river restoration along there, that's thanks to the Watershed Council. Right now, up on the Upper Deschutes, we're working on Ryan Ranch and getting that all restored and good wetlands. One of the biggest projects during my tenure is down on Whitejuice Creek at Camp Polk, where back in the early days, the engineers straightened out Whitejuice Creek for water delivery. And we were involved in restoring the old channel and how that went about, and planting trees, or not planting trees, but placing trees for habitat. And we've done a number of retreats since then out there, and the change in that is just remarkable. So I just wanted to say thank you for your continued support, and we're doing amazing things with it. So thank you.
Thank you very much
Thanks.
for joining us.
Thanks for coming, Rick.
Yeah, I think that concludes our presentation. If there's other questions we can answer, but appreciate your time again today.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you coming. It's hard for us to keep up with all the different organizations that we are somehow involved in or represent different parts of the county, and so we've kind of set out to have people come and talk to us and keep us involved. So that's good. So appreciate that.
Welcome, Chris.
Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it. Look forward to working with
Back
you.
to the.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is consideration of a signature of a letter supporting for Planning Division to apply for a transportation growth management grant to update the transportation system plan. Peter Russell, join us. And we're running a little bit late, or
As quick as I can.
long on our thing, not because of you, but.
So, would you like to sign the letter? Oh, you want a little
go.
more than
You're
that?
done with
Okay.
it that fast.
Oh, well, you gave us, is this yours too? We're going to give.
Yes.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
So the board had requested a little more briefing on the TSP. So in the slideshow, I will briefly go through. I'll talk generally about what is a TSP, what's our current one, and what's coming up. So general background on transportation system plans. The state of Oregon requires them. They're a 20-year plan for county roads, state highways, and all modes. Cities have to do TSPs as well. ODOT has to do a TSP for their system. By modes, we mean auto, bikes, freight, PEDs, planes, safety, transit. There's some other modes that we don't have here, like, river navigation. In your transportation system plan, you include goals, policies, and objectives. These can be mode-specific or more general. Also in your transportation system plan, much as the road department has a capital improvement project list, they pull that from our TSP project list, so it sets priorities. So we have high, medium, low, which means build it in 0 to 5 years, medium is 6 to 10, low is 11 to 20, and then we have preliminary cost estimates at the time for what we were going to do. And also the last chapter in the TSP is how are you going to fund everything. That's always the one that's the most entertaining to write, because you have to look at gas tax revenues or bonding or SDC's revenue. So what we have in our current TSP, it was done, we started about 2007, 2008. It was mainly produced in-house. I wrote it. All the text and tables are me. The maps are Tim Berg. So you're looking for who made the error. Hello. So,
We know where to find you.
we know where to find me. In terms of the traffic modeling, so you project traffic out 20 years. We don't have the technical expertise in-house to do that, so the Oregon Department of Transportation did that. They basically cobble your county up into about 140 transportation analysis zones and pick traffic out of those based on land use. The one thing we're most proud of in planning is the extensive public outreach. So besides kickoff, midterm, and final meetings and board presentations and planning commissions, if someone was having a coffee at their neighborhood and wanted us to talk about the TSP, myself and George Kolb went there. So 140 meetings over 4 years. So what it ended up with is you have $360 million in projects spread across bike, PED, auto, bridges. Of that $306 million, $76 million were for 4 high-priority state highway projects. $32 million were 16 high-priority county road projects.
I haven't looked through your proposal. I got a couple of questions. So what are the other 200 million for?
They were lower priority, so these are the ones we're going to build the soonest. So it's spread across. If you here's my teaser. If you want to go to the TSP in Chapter 5, there's a table that breaks everything out by whether it's a county road intersection, a county segment, a highway segment, a highway intersection, a bridge, or a bike ped, or a sidewalk. So it was everything. It was sidewalks and Terrebonne.
I was wondering
Sidewalks
if,
and Terrebonne.
I'm on the Redmond Airport Board, and they have a lot of projects going on there. Was that part of the 306 million, or was that a separate?
No, because it's in the city of Redmond. So we're just doing things that were within rural Deschutes County. So projects that were in the cities were not included unless it was something that was on the same border that we shared.
This is just 306 for all the unincorporated areas.
Correct. Yeah, it's the rural county and our urban unincorporated. So what you do functional classification. So this map here, I apologize, it's kind of hard to see, but basically the dash roads are state highways. Red are county arterials, blue are county collectors, the green are a special collector category, they're forest highways that the county maintains. We had a couple reclassifications in the Bend area as part of the TSP update. Proposed improvements, this is of course completely illegible, I recognize. But what we have is, it's better in the actual document and online. Green was an overpass of the county road or highway. Blue was an overpass or an interchange. So for instance, the Quarry Road interchange was in discussions. That's the blue dot just immediately south of Redmond. That was a low priority project, 11 to 20 years, about 15 million. Orange roundabouts, you can see a collection of roundabouts just to the east of Bend. Red was a signal, so there's one at the west edge of Redmond where we shared jurisdiction. Purple was an eventual turn lane improvement and then interchange down at the junction of 97 and Oregon 31. And then for travel and turn lane improvements, I'll go back.
You're going pretty
Well, you said you
fast.
want me to catch up time, man.
I can't even keep up.
Okay.
So this first, you've got several maps here. So the first one is the county road system one, or are you onto the proposed intersection one?
So the first one, I'll go slower the second time. So the first one, the
Those ones
dash
we just
lines.
talked about.
Okay.
No, I heard it. So,
Okay.
so that's in our transportation plan.
Correct.
We
These-
look at it, we'll find this map
Yes.
in there, and that's,
You will.
and this was setting out all of the, what you just mentioned,
Yes.
all the projects. Okay.
That's figure F5, 3.F2. So these are all from the current TSP.
Okay.
I'll try and slow it a little bit. So going to the next one,
Tell me when you switch maps.
switch. So future travel and travel lane improvements.
Okay, so we're on the third map.
Yes. So the one thing you'll notice, green are turn lanes. Those are mainly on the west edge of Redmond. Red is additional travel lanes and capacity. So what kind of leaps out as a transportation geek for me in this map is that the county road system, when we did this TSP, pretty much had adequate capacity. If you'll notice, all the additional lanes are all on the state highway system. They're 97 north of Redmond. There's passing lanes west of Sisters. There's improvements between Lava Butte National Monument and Lapine on 97. You can see there's not a lot of traffic going out to Burns, so no real need for lane improvements there, but almost all the need for additional travel lanes or passing lanes were on the state system. So we didn't do anything on like Powell Butte Highway or Deschutes Market, which are county roads. Okay, any questions on this one before I go forward?
So all 300 million is incorporated in these several maps. Is that kind
There's
of accurate?
there's some additional projects that aren't on these maps that because of the scale, so it's like sidewalk improvements, bridge
It's
replacements.
all the big
Yeah.
stuff. Okay.
Quick question, Peter.
Yeah.
On the travel or the future travel lanes on 97, the state highway, is that in anticipation of possible county participation and funding for that?
So when ODOT does a project, they always come to whatever the local jurisdiction is as if they want to put money in it or not. So that's always during project development. I don't know, I can't remember if we participated in I think we gave some money towards the four-laning, the dividing of the highway south of Bend, but it doesn't require us. It's something they can ask if we want to have local participation.
Okay, thank you.
But this was actually all set up June 30th of 2011,
Yes, that's the date where we had our TSP.
so no one really allocated for all the traffic though then, on like 97.
Yeah, so we do. So when I walk through the 2040, that's all the thing we did for the one I just did. So you do a 20-year projection. So what you're doing is saying, in that 2010, 2030 document, we're going to assume 20 years of traffic growth and what are the improvements you're going to need on the system. And so they begin implementing it. So, does that answer your question? Or? Okay.
And,
Yeah.
so when you did this, started in 07 and you finished in 11, so you're that's during the start and then the deepening of the recession, really. Did that skew your assumptions for what was going to happen? I mean, living here, it kind of skewed most of our assumptions about, we were wondering.
So it's a great question. So the traffic modeling was done. So the way you do traffic modeling, if you look back as far forward as you're going. So if you're going to project 20 years, you look back 20 years, and what was your traffic growth then? So if typically in the county system, it's 2 to 3%. So we took that and forecast it. So it was pre-recession where a lot of the modeling occurred. But again, so what we may see when we see the future forecast for the next TSP update is that it may not be as high because you're starting from a lower rate, because recession levels, I mean, the traffic dropped like
I guess
substantially.
what I'm thinking is that, so if you started 20 years back, you missed the 80s, which was the last big recession, which is, if
Correct.
we just saw a population thing, I guess yesterday, the population projections, I was looking at that one decade had very little growth, and then this decade was lowered growth too, and I just was wondering if it skews your, yeah, so if you'd have to have gone back 30 years to include that factor, and so this last recession will be in this plan, I guess,
Yes,
for
it will.
2040.
And generally,
But it may be unrealistic the other way, maybe too low if we don't have another recession during the next 2040. Yeah.
So basically, when you look back 20 years, that it should even out. I mean, this recession was really remarkable for its duration, but generally, when you look back 20 years, the peaks and the valleys will kind of level out. You get that line of best fit curve, for lack of a better phrase. So it'll be lower probably.
But, there was a recession in the 1930s in America, in the country, in the world. There was one in the 70s for us, and the 80s for California. And then they're big. They're kind of, and then there's this last one. But the other little recessions, I agree, they kind of level out. But these big ones really changed some directions, I think.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so part of when we look back for the modeling for the next TSP update, it will have a lower baseline because you'll be looking at the 2010 era. So some of the traffic from the tail end of the Great Recession, you'll have those lower levels. Right. Okay, so what we do in 2020, 2040. So first off, since this is requesting for funding, I'll walk that through first. So if the board approves, planning will apply for an ODOT DLCD TGM grant. What all those initials means, the Oregon Department of Transportation, Department of Land Conservation Development, they have a joint program called Transportation Growth Management. That's what funded the county's first TSP in '98. That's what funded the 2010 TSP that we have now, and we're hoping it'll fund the update. We're requesting approximately $150,000. We talked with ODOT, said what's a reasonable number for a TSP given our complexity, size of our jurisdiction, et cetera. They said, yeah, 150 sounds reasonable. The grant requires a 12% local match. That match can be cash, it can be in-kind services, it can be a combo of either. So for instance, if your county engineer is involved in project committee meetings, you can charge his time, or they can charge my time, or the road department can cut a check. So that's the way we can do that. We're not limited to 12%. You can be higher. We'll talk with Chris on that if he wants to make it higher or not, or just stick with the 12%.
So question along those lines, is this a product of the road department or a product of community development department?
It's led by Community Development Department, but the road department has input, obviously. So what we did in the past is we had a technical advisory committee, so we had then George Kolb, who was the county engineer, be on it. Tom Blust was on the steering committee, who was then the county road department director, so we make sure that the road department is heavily plugged into the whole process.
So yeah, I guess I'm not clear. I mean, maybe that's how we staff it and how it proceeds. So it's Deschutes County's transportation system plan,
Right.
a product of Deschutes County proper.
Right. So
And it's up to us to figure out who's producing it. You're saying you're the lead on that, or you're the?
yeah, I'll be the lead. This one we'll probably use a consultant instead of having me just write it, simply because we're swamped. But essentially, I'll take it to the planning commission. I'll bring it to the board. We'll have road department input. So it's those two departments we worked really closely on the last TSP. We're kind of the lead, just because it's a planning document.
So it is a planning document, community development department.
Right. Yeah, it's part of the comprehensive plan. So. Okay, so the deadline to submit our application is June 6th at 4 p.m. And then we'll know sometime in August 2019. They didn't give us an exact date, so I don't know if that's August 1 or August 31. Assuming we're successful, then we have to have our contracts with the consultants and scopes of work signed and approved by May 2020, and then the TSP needs to be done by September 22 under the grant. So major topics. Now, again, this is kind of cart before horse because we don't know what some of the major topics are until we go out and do public outreach and see what people say. But first off, you update your traffic volumes. That's obviously going to happen regardless. Then, based on what your traffic volume predictions for 2040 say, you look if it meets the mobility standards for either an ODOT facility or a county facility. Again, we're just looking at state highways, county arterials, county collectors. We don't look at local roads at a TSP. and you see if the intersections perform adequately, and if the road segments perform adequately, or if they need improvements, and if so, what. We also review the crash history on our county system to see if there are any patterns of where they occur or type of crash, and then what are reasonable countermeasures to institute for that. So let's say you have an area where a lot of people are running off the road. Do you put rumble strips there? Do you put chevrons? What kind of work do you use? We'll incorporate the road department's transportation safety action plan that they're doing right now into the TSP, because they're doing a lot of the footwork for us. Then you update your project lists and priorities. So you take off the ones you've already built. You add if there's any new ones. You re-examine the priorities, see if you agree with the high, mediums, and lows. And then, of course, you're adding new cost estimates. Review our goals, policies, and objectives, see if there's still an agreement by the board, because it's a policy document, so you have say-so on that. So some of the ones, again, we haven't gone out and done the open houses yet and listening sessions, but there are some things I'm already hearing. So particularly traffic volumes are up at the rural-urban fringe where our county roads come into the urban network. So this isn't exhaustive. I always love how the spacing's perfect on my computer, and then I come over here. But so one of the ones that have come up over and over that we've heard, because I'm on a lot of technical advisory committees with the city, Redmond, Lapine. So Quarry 97, that Helmholtz corridor on the west side of Redmond, because it wraps around to Pershall and O'Neill, the Baker Knott Road area in South Bend, and they've got some refinement work going down there. US 20 at Hamby Ward, we currently have a planned roundabout there. Don't know if that moves up in priority or not. And then, of course, Deschutes Market Road is seeing huge increases in volume. It's about doubled since I started here. So those are just kind of the general. It's not an exhaustive list of hotspots, but that kind of gives you an idea of where we've heard from already. We've also heard from the cycling community about our roads. Most part, they're pretty happy with them because we've got a new way of working with chip seal. For the state highway, we work with ODOT on projects on the US 97 and 20 corridors, see if they have any improvements that they're looking at and what their timing might be. Then we review consistency with other master planning efforts. There's a lot of planning going on currently in the area. So Cascades Eats Transit is doing a 20-year master plan for their bus service. Bend and Redmond are wrapping up their transportation system plans, and we're getting ready to start a Wiki-Up Junction refinement plan with the city of Lapine for what to do down in that area. So any questions on this?
Yeah, so it all looks good to me. I'm going to be supportive of the grant application, but two things that really strike me. One is this is all kind of incremental improvements. About you're aware of where all the stress areas are on the county roads, and we all drive them and see them too. So what about the big picture thing about whether we're ever going to have a beltway around the city if we're planning for something like that? I've had a lot of people that have lived in places like this that grew, and they ended up doing them later rather than earlier, and they've said, well, you ought to work on that now, and I don't know how this gets done, but you go to Eugene now, and there's the there's the Pape Beltway, and then there's the one coming in from Thurston that's kind of where you just basically have ways to get lots of people somewhere else rather than stopping along the way. And I see this tampering down with traffic with circles, but that isn't what I see in other parts of Oregon, or the roundabouts. Like we've talked about it with, Tumalo and Cooley, and now we're going to go east with another one. And those are, but what about the big picture thing? And I particularly tie it to the fact that if there is a major federal infrastructure program in the next couple of years, that's really what we should be queued up. That would be the time maybe in the next couple of decades that we actually would have access to money that we might need, because it's all bigger dollars than these smaller projects. So how does that fit into a transportation plan?
That's what a TSP is supposed to do, is do your 20-year big picture plan. So the east side bypass, that's been talked about since the 98 TSP in the Parkway. It'll probably come up again. The reasons it hasn't been done in the past is when ODOT was first building the Parkway, they did origin and destination surveys, stopped people, said, where are you going? It turns out they were going to Bend. Nobody really wanted to bypass Bend. So see if that's still true or not. The other thing that we have is ODOT's updating the Parkway master plan to try and end some of the gridlock on the Parkway. So maybe it keeps a better through route so people stay on the Parkway. Or do you look at a bypass, probably going to be a state facility, not us. Then ODOT has policy 1G, their bypass policy of things that have to happen before they can ever build a bypass. So that comes into play. I know that.
So will those be topics of our?
Yes.
I get what you're saying, and I'm not really encouraging anything specifically. I'm not saying a bypass. It's more of a like you said, what do you call it, point of where you're trying to get to.
Or origin destination surveys.
Destinations. That's what I see in other cities, is really there's in Salem, you see what they've done there, and Eugene more. But I haven't ever seen that in all our plans, and I've never seen an ODOT plan for a bypass, and I don't know if it's just bypassing or distributing traffic differently. I'm just thinking big, because what I see is lots of little projects, little 3 million here, 2 million there, and it's going to make everything a little better. But it seems like we may have an opportunity in the next couple of years, and so maybe it's before this plan's implemented to do something bigger.
So there's two ways to bypass. I mean, you can do it operationally or you can do it spatially. So like operationally, I'm not saying ODOT's going to do this, but if ODOT yanked every access off the parkway, you could bypass Bend on 97 because you couldn't get on and off. They might have one at the north and south end of town. I'm not saying they're doing that. Don't bet right. ODOT bypassing Bend by so it's just.
But they're thinking about stuff like that. And
yes,
I don't know if we have input in that, but a lot of us are not going to be happy.
Right. No, I'm in the technical advisory committee, so
because a lot of us use it to get within Bend.
Right.
Because the streets are so crowded now, and so I don't know.
Correct.
So you're saying we integrate with ODOT in this planning process?
Yes. So we've got.
What about the federal government? And because that's where I think the big money would come from.
So the FHWA, the FHWA doesn't really do planning. They dedicate it to the state planning programs to do that, and then they can. They're called in for review and for comment, but generally the planning is all done at the state or local level. So like I said, you can bypass operationally, you can do spatially, go into the east side of town. There's always been that discussion of, what do you do? Can you go out like Hamby Ward up to Empire, down to, Rickard? Again, nobody panic. I'm not saying we're doing that right now, but it's a discussion. Matter of fact, you look at our current TSP where it has a discussion about future conditions. There's a whole segment about the east side bypass through the years and why it has or hasn't been done. Then you get the whole state land use program that comes into play. So I know. Commissioner Derry, you had a question?
I have a question. Peter, okay, so Highway 126 and 20 that meet right outside of, or kind of in between, Sisters. I was told that it wasn't really on the state plan yet. Is there a way that we as a county can get that? Because something needs to be done.
So if it's.
It can be a mess when we have a lot of snow on the ground. It's really poorly delineated.
So we on our TSP deal with what's within the county boundaries, but I know that Sisters has talked about putting in some kind of an ODOT of putting a roundabout or doing something with the junction, right at the east end of Sisters. Now, whether it drifts into county.
By the elementary school, but really, 20 and 126, they really need something too.
Right. So we can.
And not two roundabouts.
Your
back to
question
back.
is, can we impact? What
can we help get it on the state plan?
We can when the state comes up with their statewide transportation improvement program, lovingly known as the STIP. It comes out for public comment. So that's one of the things that the county can say, this with coordination with the sister city council, that this area needs to be looked at. So in our TSP, we can certainly mention it. But if the lane you're talking about is in city of Sisters, that's their jurisdiction. If it's outside and it's on ours, then we can comment on it. But certainly if Sisters.
Is the junction I think
not
the
sure what
junction's
the
outside Sisters, isn't it?
I think in the junction's in Sisters.
Really?
I'd have to look, but
Outside of the street?
I think that Y is, because it's right by the way station, so I'm
The
thinking.
way station's on the other side.
Yeah, but I can look at it, so I'll
kind
get
of
back to
tied
you.
to that, with regard to the state plan, so they passed this big, transportation bill, $5 billion. And basically what Deschutes County has gotten in projects that I've seen is that we got the Terrebonne money, 20 million, and we've got some money sitting for the north end of Bend, 50 or 60 or whatever, 70 million. But it doesn't seem like we're about 5% of the state. It doesn't seem like we've got our 5%. And so do we watch that and lobby to make sure within the department to make sure we're getting our share of because we collect a lot of the gas tax and lots of, so, it was a big deal that they were going to do all this stuff, but when I see what we've gotten, it doesn't seem very big.
So yes, no, we monitor it, we participate, but most of the true congestion is on the state facilities rather than the county facilities. Remember that one map I showed you where we really didn't need any passing lanes and minimal intersection improvements on our county system? Because for the longest time, most of the travel is on the state system, not on the county system. But we can always, so we monitor when grants come out. I know Chris does that as well. He gets some grants through Western Lands Program.
I'm not interested just in monitoring, I'm lobbying for it. We, I don't want it to be a redistribution program, and we get taxed, our gas taxes go to pay for the Portland area.
Portland would argue the other way around.
Well, they've made their choices over 40 years, and
I just mean where the funds come from, if you look. So, yeah, we get funds. So they come to the Region 4, which is Central Oregon and ODOT, based on, a formula, that the way the gas tax is distributed. So, I mean, that's something you could approach the legislature about relooking at the gas tax in terms of how it's
so there are
set up.
formulas that try
Yes.
to distribute it equally.
They're by set percentages. It's not like a third and a third and a third to the state, the cities and the counties. It's, I think, I'd have to look up the exact formula, but there's a formula for state, cities, and counties in terms of how gas tax is collected.
Seems like some of our options are foreclosed because we're told there's no state money for it. But we just passed a $5 billion funding measure, and it seems like I don't know.
I know Commissioner DeBone had a question, then I'll.
I do. So if in the near future, there was a discussion about what does it look like to adopt a local road for maintenance if it was built to county standards, is this the place that would happen at all in the TSP, or is that just a policy of the county? Just a policy of the road department?
You could have a discussion in the TSP. It could be in the policy. Again, it's one of those where, the board has to adopt it into the county maintained system and ensure that there's enough funding. Currently, as you know, we've got a moratorium against bringing any new roads in, although the latest update of the moratorium gave the board discretion if it was an arterial or a collector. So there is that.
Yeah, there's some good analysis that could be done, and just like Commissioner mentioned, the transportation package, there's going to be some more gas dollars, relative to the taxes being collected. So there may be a point in the future where it's, a ripe discussion, but it could be a project of the TSP update to figure out,
Yeah, we have reclassifications, and so the last TSP, we had some functional classification changes. So Deschutes Market Road went from a collector to an arterial. I think the same thing for Hamby because of traffic patterns have changed. So it's certainly appropriate to have that in the TSP.
So I advocate for that.
Okay. Commissioner Dare?
Oh, so Ward Hamby, when is there like a date on that? Because I've been told that something is going to happen out there. Are we still, is that really not true?
So it's in our TSP as a low, which was 11 to 20, but ODOT's looking at it again because of,
Fatalities.
right. So, yeah, so they're looking at it.
Yeah, they're moving it up and.
Right. I just want to make sure
But
that,
they're planning on a roundabout out there.
Right.
That's what they said, that in the next couple of years is what I understood.
Yeah, again, it'd be on their STIP, their Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, for when their intended construction date is.
Well, when you speak of a roundabout, I think of some analysis of roundabouts would be good, some basic analysis, and I'm sure it's been done, and, City of Bend has used it all over the place. But, I think of myself at an intersection. We were at Tumalo yesterday coming back from Eagle Crest. When one direction is just queued up and rolling, it's hard to interject yourself into that system, but it's hard to interject yourself into the system right now without an overpass. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, kind of the public input and some engineering analysis about
So,
what a roundabout fixes and doesn't fix.
so ODOT has a refinement plan that they're doing for Tumalo. There'll be an open house next month where they're going to talk
But I'm
about the
referring to
two
just-
no, it's actually next week.
I'm
next.
referring to roundabouts design in general, not even.
Oh yeah, they've got all kinds.
Educational purposes for everybody.
Okay. Any?
I'm supportive of the application. Sounds like,
We're all supportive.
There you go.
So get them.
is there a letter right now, or is this preparing for?
You should have.
There's a letter.
Yeah, I've got a draft in your packet, so Sharon would have the
So,
original.
just seek a motion to support this letter in support of the applying for this grant.
So moved.
Second, okay, Commissioner DeBone?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. I think, Peter, we're going to want to have, hear about this as it goes along and be kept up to date, because we are thinking about some of this, and I've been talking about this federal infrastructure as many times as I can. I just think it's going to happen, and it'd be a mistake if we miss that opportunity. And I don't know if the people at the state level are going to, how they're accessing it or whatever, and I don't know that our state's going to get it very much of it, but I think, we'll see. But
So just so you know, of those 140 meetings, there were several work sessions with the board. So the way we do it is, we just don't come up and say, could you please adopt this at the end of a 3-year process, and that's the first time you've seen it. So you'll be sick of me. I'll be here several times with drafts and various
We're
issues.
never sick of you.
Okay, thank you.
speaking of that, I think you're next. So we'll finish it. We finished up that action item, so we're going to move on to a public hearing on the appeal of a system and development charge for Tumalo Lavender.
Gordon,
Move right into that. And we're only about 17 minutes behind, but we'll work in past noon if we need to, so.
Good afternoon, Board. I remain Peter Russell, Senior Transportation Planner. What we have before you is an appeal of a transportation system development charge for Tumalo Lavender. The applicant, Gordon Knight, is here with me, so I'll kind of give the quick staff proposal, and then I'll let Mr. Knight speak his piece. Additional information that I put on your desk this morning. At the work session, you had asked if there were any other places where we had commercial activities in conjunction with the farm use and whether we charge SDCs for them. So you should have a two-sided piece of paper. One has the map of where Mr. Knight's lavender farm is. And then on the other side are about, half dozen or so of other land use files and whether we charged an SDC or not. These were based on about a 15-minute search through our database, courtesy of Will Groves, one of our planners who's better at computers than I am. We came up with, these are similar uses. We want to point out for the two that don't have SDC charges at the top, CO9, which is conditional use, 0937, which is livestock feed and sales. You would think that would have had an SDC, and I thought, geez, did I miss that? But I went back and looked, and I remembered when the 2008 SDC resolution was only tied to building permits. So this particular land use did not need any building permits, so there was no linkage to the SDC. Then in 2013, when the board updated the SDC resolution, we added the language or development permit. So if you need a land use application and you didn't need a building permit, we could still charge an SDC. So in essence, if that conditional use 0937 had come forward today, we would have charged an SDC on them. In terms of the next one down below, there was 3 horse shows with no SDC. As a matter of best practices, the Planning and Road Department, we talked about these and said, if you're only having 3 horse shows a year, that we really can't charge an SDC on that. SDCs are more designed for permanent land uses. So let's say you've got a restaurant, or you've got a gas station, or you've got something that's open all the time, not just a couple 3 periodic events. All the rest are really similar. You had asked about the alpaca products one on 97. That was a $15,000 SDC. We talked about Rainbow Organics. That's the $3,758 SDC. That was 1 p.m. peak hour trip back in the day at the old rate. We had another one out of code enforcement. That's the one on Southwest Quarry, which was the sale of hay, feed, seed, and accessory items. That was another 1 p.m. peak hour trip SDC, $38.52. The yellow highlight is Mr. Knight's lavender processing and sales. And then the last one is a new guest ranch and agritourism with commercial events out there west of Sisters, which has a kind of which has an SDC for that. So staff's point, I'll let Mr. Knight speak, is that the land use was approved for a single-family home. That's 1 p.m. peak hour trip based on the ITE rate. There was a code enforcement case for the lavender sales and processing. So you go through land use, we review. A review as if it's a greenfield operation. There's nothing occurring there at the site. So because you've got processing and retail sales, you've got more trips than a single-family home. The residential use is continuing. So we charged 1 p.m. peak hour trip, which was like $3,937. Mr. Knight appealed, as is his right. Chris Doty, the road department director, reviewed his appeal materials and said, well, because you are a seasonal use, we'll charge you basically a type 2 home occ instead of the type 3, which means it's half a p.m. peak hour trip, so your SDC is halved. And then Mr. Knight is appealing that decision before you. because he would prefer, I assume, to pay zero for an SDC. So with that, I'll be quiet unless you have any questions and turn it over to Mr. Knight.
I have one procedural question. We've had someone asked to be heard today on this matter, or
They cannot.
so there's no room
No,
for testimony
no.
on this.
So this is kind of like a road naming. When you've had some of those, the only people who can appeal a road naming are people who are either property owners or renters on those affected properties. The public, general public can't comment. Same thing with an SDC. It's between the property owner and staff, that you don't have public testimony on it.
So, Enzi, I guess you've requested to do this, what's the, oh, yeah, go ahead.
I think to clarify that, certainly the public doesn't have a right to bring an appeal or to challenge it, but I think it's fully within the board's discretion if you want to allow anybody that's present to testify. There'd be no procedural issue in allowing that if you choose to do that.
Okay. And the rationale would be this is
a
We
very
have a public
informal
call.
hearing process. It's almost like a meeting. It's not quite a full hearing. It doesn't adhere to the rules of evidence or.
But we are kind of looking at the public policy issue of charging for use of different uses or something, that's the rationale, okay.
Certainly, and you could certainly put strict time limits on if you choose to, specific to opening it up beyond the applicant.
Yeah. Do we need to, should we decide that now before we continue, or?
Probably a good idea if you're gonna open it up that.
So a decision amongst
Amongst us, whether we'd want to hear, if there anybody else here that was going to testify on this matter? We have another. Okay, so I'm not against hearing it, I guess. Would you be open to having testimony? I understand technically it's not required, but, so there's a form, are you going to, okay.
I was going to wait for you to decide if you were going to.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, so-
supportive. I mean, if people here.
So probably allow 3 minutes testimony from anyone that wants to about the situation, if it helps us inform our decision, but.
I'd note that's similar to how you've run contract protest hearings as well, where it's the parties to the contract that have the right to bring the challenge, but
Okay.
you've opened it up in the past to folks that show up and have an interest in
Okay,
speaking.
so if you'll get that signed and just turned into Laura, then we'll go for it, so.
So one other question then.
Yeah.
So this is not a quasi-judicial land use matter?
That's correct.
This is a policy of Deschutes County's road department in implementing system development charges.
Right, and the way the resolution reads, it's just an opportunity for the applicant to be able to vet
Voice
his
their-
or her concerns with the
Yep.
governing body. It's a step in the process. If they're not happy with what you decide, they have an option to go to circuit court.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Getting clarification.
So any questions for Peter at this point?
No.
Okay. Mr. Knight, go ahead.
Thank you, Board Commissioners. I'm not a professional like Peter here, so bear with me. When we first looked at this piece of property back in, I think, 2001, is a weed patch. It had not been farmed in years. This picture, even though it's an overhead, kind of give you an idea of what the beauty of that farm looks like today. 10,000 lavender plants out in the field. We have people that come by and they'll stop, special bicyclists, they'll stop out there on the road and they'll take pictures. Very beautiful thing. But when we first started looking at the property, we had sold and moved off a very large piece of property out east of town. We knew we could not live in town where your boundary line is 5 feet from each other's fence. So we started looking out in Tumalo for the piece of property, and we found this. Before we purchased it, I came into the county and asked, what can we do in MUA 10 zoning? How does that differ from EFU? The young lady that I talked to that day, many years ago, said that MUA 10 was not as restrictive. There's more things that you could do there, small acreages. MUA 10 supposedly gives a small farmer the ability to go out and do things, not have a weed patch like what we bought. So after we bought it, we then took about 3 years, my wife and I, Judy and I, spent about 3 years, what are we going to do with this piece of property? How can we change it? How can we make things look better than what it is? And what can we do in our retirement years? We started studying lavender. We spent literally 3 years studying as much as we could about lavender, the uses of it, what you could do with it, and how would the general public interact with our lavender fields. We also needed to create something that had an income, because when you're on Social Security, nowadays that doesn't really take care of anything. So we went ahead and we started the lavender business. We put in the first 1,000 plants. Following year, found out that we only lost 2 of the to gophers. The type that we had, lavender types, grew really well in Central Oregon. We're a true Zone 5. A lot of lavender that you see in the big box stores, look at the label, because they're usually for Zone 7 and 8. They don't grow in Zone 5. So
That's a climate
climate
zone.
climate zone.
It's critical, because they
Yes.
know it doesn't work if you can't.
Yes, that's true. So for a few years after we got started, we actually sold our 3-gallon size to the local Costco. And the people loved it because a year later, they're still growing. So that kind of got us started on the course that we are today. We started growing lavender for other people. We would take live cuttings off of the now 10,000 plants out in the field, is what you can see. All those are individual rows.
Can you share that with us?
It's
That-
the back
We have it on the
Is it
back.
the back? Oh, the
It's
back.
on the back of the picture. It's,
list.
I did drive by this morning
Oh,
on
the
my way
list.
to the
Okay.
office.
Okay, sorry.
And they are really beautiful plants. And I always admire people that can grow something like a lavender.
Well, thank you. And a lot of our plants are just now coming out of being dormant. So hopefully by the 1st of July, everything will be in a fully bloom and very beautiful. But anyway, getting back to selling our plants to Costco, that opened our eyes that there's a lot of people that want to buy lavender plants that were acclimated and grown here in Central Oregon. So we started that process. We're taking live cuttings off the mother plants on the field. We'll root those, and then a year later, they're ready to go out in small containers. 2 years later, larger containers. 3 years later, the size that we sold to Costco. So we've been doing that for a lot of years. Growing lavender is our number one thing that we do on the farm. With lavender, though, one of the main number one reasons for growing lavender is to get the lavender oil. Lavender dates back over 2,000 years. Lavender is part of the mint family. When you grow mint basically for the oil. So when we started, we knew, okay, we're going to have to find a way to extract the oil. You do it by steam distillation. Just about every large lavender farm has steam distillation, just like the mint growers. We're growing a product that isn't just another pretty flower, like roses or whatever. So by doing what we're doing and growing the lavender, we have the plants that we sell and ship out all over the United States. But the oil is very important. So we have a distillation. We were totally almost blindsided when last year we received a letter from the county that said that we're in a non-compliance situation, that we couldn't really distill our oil in the MUA-10 zone. If you look around the state of Oregon and almost every state in the United States where they're growing lavender, every lavender field distills their own oil. And they're not a commercial use. So that started a long process, very expensive one for me, one that we financially were not expecting at all, and one that basically stated if we don't apply for a commercial use in an MUA zone, we could basically be shut down. We cannot distill our oil, period. But before all that happened, quite a few years ago, we decided we needed to have a small building, turned out about 500 square feet, where we could store our products, where when somebody would come out to buy lavender, we could take them in there, where we could do a credit card or pay cash or whatever, so we wouldn't have to do business in a greenhouse. So we applied for the building permit. The building permit was issued. The planning staff signed off on it, knowing what the use of the building was going to be for. We could have people come in, they could do their pay us for plants or whatever, and they could look around because by then we started making some lavender products. People love lavender. They like the products. They love my lemonade. They also like my wife's lavender lemon cake, which if you come down to the farmer's market this afternoon, will be there. So we did that. We had the store there, the building that we stored excess materials. So when you go to farmers markets, which is about 80% of our sales of products, not just at the farm, we would be out there, it'd be in a nice warm area, it'd be rodent-free. So we had that building. We thought we were okay, based on everybody signing off, and all of a sudden, years later, we get this letter. We're non-compliant. You can't distill lavender without having a commercial zone. And by the way, we're going to make this building a commercial zone. So that opened up a whole different direction for us. Financially, it was very difficult for us. It's taken a lot of time. I had to hire somebody that would represent me, that would help me figure out what's going on. I knew Mr. Blickstad from earlier years. He was very helpful in getting us to a point where we could proceed. The whole thing about this road situation, nothing has really changed at the farm. The building hasn't changed. I had to buy a permit for a little over $100. So the head of the building department, Mr. Deschutes, he came out, he looked at the building, he said, Gordon, this building is fine. You don't have to make any changes. Even the ADA, we don't have to make changes. But because of the county's decision of saying you have to buy a new permit so we can say you're doing a commercial thing, triggered this whole thing about the road. We're not going to have any more traffic today or tomorrow as we've had in the past years. And the people who are on Canarn Road that are probably most interested in our lavender field are bicyclists who will stop, take a breather, take a picture, and keep pedaling on. We don't have that kind of traffic coming and going. The most traffic we'll have is when we start shipping plants out, which will be between now and the 1st of July, and we'll ship plants out or people will come pick them up. The other traffic that we'll have will be the retirement centers. They bring their little buses out that people love to come out, and they walk through the lavender field. We have areas where they can sit in the shade. Some people even bring their sack lunch. Families will come out and they'll take pictures of their kids and their lavender. So we're not building an empire that's going to have 100 cars every day. That's not us. We're trying to retire. But we can't afford to quit because of...
How many cars will you have at a time? I see on the picture there's some showing, so.
Well, what's back here are vehicles that we have.
Oh, okay.
I need to get rid of some antique trucks,
Oh.
except for a 1970 Chevy pickup. And I have a couple of tractors and things like that. So there will be during the winter we have zero. In April, people start calling, hey, can we buy a plant, even though it's too early to plant them because of the weather. Let's take them home, put them in the garage, or to do something. By July 1st, we should be in full bloom, depending on our spring, how cold it gets, whatever. So from about July 1st, for people visiting the lavender farm, take pictures or whatever, to about the middle of August, and then the plants are starting to turn, they're losing their color, and by the 1st September, they're ready to be distilled for the oil. So the amount of people that come and go is literally July and August. Maybe a little bit in September before school starts. The traffic that we have now will be the occasional one that want to come out and buy some plants. The rest of the traffic will be either people picking up at one time during the year, picking up the plants they bought, or we'll ship them out on a pallet with FedEx freight, or we'll load up boxes of plants and take them off the airport because we jumped through the hoops of TSA. We've been approved to ship our live plants on like Alaska Air. So that's how we do that. The amount of people that come out is minimal compared to what you see in over a 12-month period of time. Getting back to the having to become a commercial zone within an MUA 10, you can look and visit almost every lavender grower of any size anywhere in the state of Oregon or next door county, all over the United States. They're not operating under a commercial zone. As I understand it, we have fallen into this trap, being an MUA 10, of being compared to a cannabis grower. We don't do cannabis. That's not an issue. We should not be put into that thing. But we should be allowed to distill the oil from the plant. If we wanted to turn our MUA 10 into a dairy and use our big building for a milking station, milk the cows, do the process, that's legal. So why are we forced to be punished because we're trying to milk the lavender for the oil? It doesn't make sense. 10 years from now, if we're still around, we'll still be doing the same thing we're doing today. It's not a big deal. One of the issues I think that came up with the neighborhood was that we finally, after years and years of work, decided to get a building permit and add on the second level of our building, it was already there, but convert it to a larger bedroom and an exercise room for my wife and I. So we were building this, and it's very visible from the street. And about 2 weeks after we started building, the letter came up from the county. We're asking for not that we wanted to, but we were asking for a commercial zone. And the neighborhood thought, oh, well, here they go. They're going to do all these big things, and we really want that. Well, it's a misunderstanding, People see a new building on top of what we have, and this letter comes out from the county that we are requesting a commercial zone. We're not. We're basically forced to get a commercial zone. So here's where we are, doing this much more money on the street. We're not adding any more traffic than what we've already had. We don't have to have a full-blown building permit showing architectural or get an engineer out there to prove how the building was built. Mr. Scheid already knew that. They approved our plans years ago. Came out and said, Gordon said, you're fine. You're okay for AD. We've only had maybe, in all the years we've been out there, maybe 3 wheelchairs, and they've been part of the little buses that come from the retirement centers. The driver always helps them off. They can go into the building if they want to. Most of them want to go out and sit in the shade and smell the lavender. So that's why we're asking to not be charged this additional money. We're being forced to already create a larger entry onto the existing road. Going to cost a lot of money. We're going to be forced into having a ADA special parking. This whole thing is going to cost us thousands of dollars. And it shouldn't be there. It should not have happened to begin with.
Today, all we're talking about is the SDC, though. I don't think this is a hearing on the, is that right? This isn't a hearing on whether the commercial
No, that's how it all led up
permits,
to.
yeah.
It all led up to why we're here today.
Yeah. But, so I think we've heard, understand what you're saying. Questions,
No
commissioners?
questions. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Dare, any questions?
No, not at the second.
Okay. When you do sell your product there as well as plants, the things you make, people can buy it there. It sounds like you ship a lot, but you can also buy product there.
Right, we have products available. Probably 80% of the products that we sell, though, that we make, will be at farmers markets, 2 or 3 day weekend type things, Summerfest, Winterfest.
Not located on the farm.
Not located on the farm.
So I think what we'll do is we'll take, we've got 2 requests now for testimony. We'll invite those people to come up. Mr. Knight, if you want to sit back in the chairs again, we'll have them probably use that. You could probably add some additional comments after that's completed. You bet, thank you. Just for clarity, Peter, the MUA zone allows this kind of use, right?
Yeah, it's a commercial use in conjunction with a farm activity.
Farm activity, and that's not uncommon in other, and that's what you've given us some examples of.
Yes.
But that part of this process is already concluded, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been approved for the use.
Yep, okay. So Nunzi Gold, you're first, and then followed by Dave Arnold. So you try to limit it to 3 minutes if you can, but.
Sure. My name's Nunzi Gould. I live in Deschutes County. I just want to start by thanking you for approving expending monies for the $150,000 grant to study transportation needs for the upcoming 20 years. The 12% match that you're going to be asked to give on that is $18,000. And what's being asked of you under this agenda item is not to contribute towards SDC fees. So we have an increasing need to spend monies within our community on transportation, planning, road development, all of those different things, and funding Peter's salary, which I'm very thankful for. We like Peter. He does great work. But the issue isn't new. The cost of doing business is the cost of doing business. And when you open up your farm for a commercial use, there are costs associated with that. Planning, land use, changing on your farm, and also paying fees, making the road safe, et cetera, et cetera. I did not arrive here from Tumalo by drone. I came in a vehicle and I drove on a road that is designed to have bicycles. And as you heard, bicycles are part of what's on Canarn Road. And if you go on Canarn Road, you'll see it does not have shoulders. It barely has a white striped area for bicycles. So these are examples of improvements that are needed on Canarn Road. Now, Canarn Road runs between Klein Falls and Gherkin. It's a very short road. So if you're coming from Sisters, you're traveling on a highway. If you're coming from Redmond, you're traveling on a highway. If you're coming from Bend, you're traveling on a highway. These all intersect at problem areas in Tumalo. For example, Klein Falls Highway from Redmond has a very short off-ramp to get onto, Highway 126 has a very dangerous and short off-ramp to get onto Klein Falls Highway. The county's currently spending monies to expand the shoulders on Klein Falls Highway. These are needs that are here today. Gherkin Market Road which takes you to Highway 20. I almost saw a lady get hit there trying to turn to travel to Bend. That is a problem area. It needs attention on the county side. Cook Avenue at Highway 20, another problem area. We don't want fatalities when you invite the public to come and shop at the farm. We need the protection. It's a public safety issue that you not just wand off a zero fee towards transportation SDCs. Every other commercial entity will want the same treatment. So it's a public safety that I am in opposition of turning fees into this is a hardship. This is the cost of doing business in our community, and it's the part of being a public citizen and participatory citizen to the costs of development and growth in our community. Thank you.
Dave Arnold?
I guess it's afternoon or close enough to it. So, name's Dave Arnold. I actually live across the street from Gordon, and I've known Gordon since he moved into the property. I'm trying to remember who owned it before him. I've lived at my current residence for over 45 years. My wife and I raise sheep as an agricultural product. We don't sell commercially. My concerns are not with Gordon and his product, because I've watched him sell his product for quite a number of years, not realizing such rules that the county has come forward. But if the county has a process for documenting and collecting fees for a commercial activity, which we don't sell, we sell to restaurants and private sales and to health food stores in the Tumalo area as well as other places. But if the county has fees, then they should be collecting those fees based on their rulings that they've done over the years of developing the cost for those fees. Basically, Gordon's growing lavender. I watched him start his lavender. I watched him build his 500 square foot building. Yeah, I believe it's 504 square foot building for lavender sales. It was considered an agricultural building back in the day when the building permit was issued. It's now going to become a commercial facility. Those are changes from what he intended to start with. He did Saturday markets. Matter of fact, my wife and Gordon sat at the same booth. I don't know if they were crossing each other, but right at each other selling their products. That product was, but we don't have a meat locker in our place as far as, you don't walk up and say, I want this lamb chop, I want this leg of lamb. We sell, wholesale. Gordon sells wholesale as commercial. Gordon should participate in the commercial operation like anybody else does. An example of another commercial activity in Tumalo is Snow Diamond Alpacas, which is just down the street. It's on Gherking Market. They sell commercially. I have no idea if the county's talked with them about an SDC fee, but they have stores open every Saturday and Sunday, even in the wintertime. They have a different product, but basically the same philosophy or the same process that Gordon has. If you're going to have a commercial business, then you're subject to the commercial fees. We're not EFU, I'm sorry, we're MUA 10. It was my understanding that years back that Gordon's property was EFU. And it has changed over the years. I think there was an appeal. I don't know if Gordon did it or somebody else did, but that's gone to MUA 10, which allows for multiple use. I have no idea what multiple use means other than agriculture. So, but that's my theory is, or my thoughts are that if it's commercial and it's SDCs, says for transportation, because just previously when Peter talked, we're trying to collect money. We're trying to get money to help with our transportation planning. You guys developed a process to make that happen. You said, okay, we'll collect fees, we'll use it to do planning. If you exclude fees or excuse fees, where's the money going to come from? State doesn't have it. At least they're not giving it to us at this point in time. So Anyway, so that's my concern.
With your land in MUA 10, as long as you're in agriculture, you get an agricultural deferral for property taxes?
We're on farm deferral.
Yeah, and
We're
that
on
would be
farm
typical,
deferral with the
yeah.
county. We have that, just the farm land, not the house
Yeah.
itself. But yeah, no, and we send a tax report every year, our farm tax report to the county assessor's office every year. My wife has an agricultural license for selling the lamb that she does. We go through a certified USDA butcher for all our stuff and everything else. So compliance, that's what I'm after, is compliance for all, not compliance for some or forgiveness for some. It's, everybody has to live by the rules. The county can't afford it and the state can't afford it.
Is there agricultural water on those lands? Do you have?
I have Tumalo irrigation water. And I worked extensively with Tumalo Irrigation on their piping plan and things like that today. Gordon is a nurse, I believe Gordon is registered as a nursery, and he uses Tumalo water for his fields. He's got, as you looked at his map, that used to be hay fields before Gordon moved in. They used to grow, the people before him, and I'm racking my mind here as to who that was. But after 45 years, we're one of the oldest, other than John Barnum, who lives down the street. We're the only oldest people that live in the Tumalo area at this point in time. So, and it's changing.
Yeah.
I mean, this morning I woke up to, you talked about 3 horse shows on Klein Falls Road. I woke up this morning too, and now we have the announcer.
Well, we noticed that we were happened to be at Eagle Crest yesterday, and we saw the horse show. So when you were mentioning it, the stalls.
That has doubled in size this year from last year. He is actually leasing fields from Steve Putnam, which has the dairy farm, which is, Steve is 3rd generation family in Tumalo. But they're actually leasing land from Steve Putnam for that show. How that became approved for an agricultural area is beyond me.
Yeah.
That's a
We
different
just happened to see it
subject.
yesterday, and we were wondering, I didn't know about it.
Well, come out and listen tomorrow morning, and you can hear him loudspeaker a half a
Six
mile away.
in the morning or so, yeah. Yeah.
What kind of show is it?
I think it's a hunter jumper show.
It is a hunter jumper show.
Yeah, the guy that puts it on actually travels throughout the United States. His business is to travel throughout the United States and set up portable stalls and the whole events and everything else. So
He's not a local person.
Oh, he lives there.
Oh, he lives there.
Yeah. He went the lineage or who owned the property back from the 1950s. I can tell you, but it doesn't do any good. So.
Next 3 minutes. Yeah. Thank you for your time. Joining us, Nick.
Mr. Chairman, I am Nick Lelak, Deschutes County Community Development Director. This hearing is on the SDCs, so I will just keep my comments to that. I will just state that I've been involved with the code enforcement process, the building permit process, the land use process, and I'm not going to respond to anything that was said other than to say I respectfully disagree with some of the statements that were made, and our department has been as accommodating as we possibly could have been from start to this point right now to make sure that the business is successfully established, legally established, and I'm happy to discuss that at another time, but that's not the purpose of this hearing, so I just want to put that on the record. Thank you.
So, Commissioners, any questions for Peter?
No
Further, I don't think I do either. So do we deliberate now, or?
That'd be the intent, was you'd make your decision
Certainly
today.
can, yeah, if you're inclined.
Are you comfortable to deliberate now, or do you want to?
I'm comfortable.
Are you comfortable to deliberate now?
Ma'am, just
Okay.
maybe if the appellant has any other closing thoughts.
Do you have any other closing thoughts or comments? Just we have a couple minutes.
Good.
Okay, thank you. All right, you want to just, who wants to start off? What are your thoughts about it? You want to go
Do you want me
first?
to start?
Yeah, sure, go
Of
first.
course you want me to start.
No, I'm happy if any of us start.
Because, you know, I
No.
love lavender.
We all love lavender, probably.
No, we don't all, but
Well.
I really do. And I've tried to grow it, and I was very impressed by the ranch, the farm this morning. I thought it was, it looks like someone really knows what they're doing. And I'd heard the reputation, but I'd never been on that little road before. So it is great. I do feel, though, that Chris, by cutting the fee, didn't he cut it in half or something? He cut it significantly, and I realized that he did start in 2005, and so if he would have originally been able to get his permits at that time, it wouldn't be applicable to have these fees attached. But because of what's happened, I feel like the county's been fair.
So, yeah, this is land use in the state of Oregon. Deschutes County is a growing place, and we do need those local dollars for investing in safety and capacity. Great story on your property there, but this does seem like the appropriate fee for the activity at that property. Going from, growing from plants and transporting them to a garden or farmer's market, and then having that commercial activity is kind of the transition I'm seeing. So I do support this system development charge as the staff has concluded.
Yeah, so I guess my thought is similar to the other two commissioners. I think that it probably was a surprise if you've been in the business since 2005. I certainly am very supportive of people doing farm businesses. As I've talked about before, my family has orchards, and other family members have places where they sell orchard products and things. But I do think once it goes to a commercial, open to the public place, the idea is that there would be additional traffic, that we need to capture some revenues for road improvements and road maintenance. We do, have deferral of farm property taxes for all farm properties in the state of Oregon. So that's a benefit on a farm that, but once it becomes commercial, I'm in favor of being the SDCs being applied. We have it in other places in the county where it's been consistent with that, and I would expect if we get more farm commercial activities on MUA, that it would be again required there under our current ordinances. I guess it'd be, which is the way we've maintained our roads to this point, and so yeah, I'm supportive of that too.
So congratulations on the effort and the success of the farm. This is, the process, and, I'm proud of the staff and the process that, and I didn't experience what you experienced, but, this is kind of the business-like atmosphere of Deschutes County, and those local dollars for investing in our transportation system are important. So.
I think, yeah, the MUA, I don't know if that affects the right to charge an SDC, but what it really means is just you can do more activities by right than you can on a EFU land. So we've had other cases where people put a church on MUA or whatever. It's just a different kind of designation. But it sounds like the code enforcement is what triggered the exposure of what you're doing, which comes to us in other cases too, where people build sometimes dwelling units on their property, and it comes up that they didn't get permits, and so those are in code enforcement. But this is really a change of use from what it was originally allowed without an SDC. So anyway, so do we need to do anything, pass a motion or anything, or is that just?
Yeah, I think it would benefit if we had a motion denying the appeal.
And I was just looking up, is there an order number? Yeah. So is that order number written up as a approval or denial, or we're making
You
that?
have it written as both.
Okay.
There's an order number.
So I'll move order number 2019-015, denying the appeal.
Okay, I'll second it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can, yep.
And so it just, in terms of discussion, the only thing we're deciding is the SDC. There's a lot more in this decision to allow the use, et cetera. We're not really commenting or part of that decision today.
Correct. All you're dealing with is a system development charge.
Okay. So, any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.